Hey, White Sox fans, guess what? It's not Monday, but we are still we did not let a Southside Sox on the Farm podcast slip by. Doing a little bit later in the week, but we are doing it. It's Darren Black. And once again, it's with Darren Black. Darren, Thank you. It's not a Monday, but I called and you picked up.
Yep, I'm here to talk minors, like always.
Sweet. Only minors. No White Sox. No college, just the minors. Okay, we do have a few highlights to address. It might not be the longest program this week, but we'll see. We'll see how long we go. Let's talk first, Darren, about, I guess you could say, a blow to the system, given that the starting pitching, really even in low minors at this point, is not deep. Starting pitching, thank God the White Sox rotation has been as intact and strong as it's been this season because there's just not a lot of reinforcement at all. And one of the two possible reinforcements in case there was an injury, Jonathan Stiever, it's been reported he's injured. There's some varying reports, but it does seem like the injury is very significant, certainly significant enough for him not to pitch again this year. White Sox are saying he'll be ready for spring training. Seems like that might not be the case, but let's not get into too much unofficial stuff. Give us your capsule on what Stiever did this year, what he was struggling with. I know it's sort of not a big loss because he probably wasn't going to be the first guy called up, but still, that's depth they don't have.
Yeah, he was probably in the mix to be one of the two guys to be put on the team in September, but probably wasn't going to. He's behind a few other guys, and they already have kind of two starters up there with the Sox right now, and Lopez and Wright. But yeah, I mean, he was really struggling all season. It was odd with him because most of the pitchers we think of that have been struggling this year, they're just walking a bunch of people.
Yeah.
In this case, his walks were actually lower than what he was doing in 2020. Not as good as he was in 2019, but that was an A ball, so AAA and MLB much different than that. But he was just getting hit hard. And if you're getting hit hard at AAA, you're not going to survive because there are actually major league guys there. He's got a 330 BABIP, not really getting a lot of grounders, so he just wasn't good. And Jimmy Lambert was getting the chances ahead of him because he was a bit better.
I think we've probably discussed this before, and thankfully we only have about a month, 5 weeks left in the regular season. So at some point the clock runs out and we don't have to worry, but this gears up the tension regarding the rotation just a little bit more. As you point out, you've got Ronaldo Lopez. I guess technically you've got a Garrett Crochet. You've got Michael Kopech, guys who could stretch out a little bit. I guess technically even Danny Wright or Mike Wright or whichever Wright he is. I'm wrong, I'm sure. But I mean, I guess if there's a significant starting injury, it's just, forget it. The Sox are in trouble, but they're not really built to withstand too much adversity in the starting rotation.
Yeah, they clearly were able to do it with the outfield that they had with like third string guys out there playing every day. The starting pitching especially was always a little less depth there, mostly because the guys that are good are up in the majors again with Giolito, and then other guys that we thought would work out, like maybe a Spencer Adams from a while ago, or Jimmy Lambert, Jonathan Stiever, just were not good enough and couldn't push that's why they got Lance Lynn, because those guys couldn't prove they were doing it. And then obviously Kopech stayed in the bullpen. They've got, I don't know, because Kopech's been in the bullpen this year, same with Crochet. I don't know how many innings they're going to have for them next year, so you've always got to think of that in the back of your head. They've already extended Lynn. I mean, if they're not going to re-sign Rodon, which probably just kind of seems like the point of why they signed Lynn to not re-sign Rodon, then I think one of those guys, Lambert receiver, will be starting. Obviously, you got to give the edge to Lambert because Stiever, his labrum is hurt. Those are important. For
Yeah. Shifting to Lambert, have you seen? I mean, both of those guys, say your primary AAA starters, guys who would have gotten calls. Ronaldo Lopez being such a weird wild card, it seems like he's on upswing now. But I mean, those are the two guys you really count on as perhaps long-term starters, or even spot guys for take a couple starts. Lambert probably was ahead before this injury, and he probably was the guy, sort of your sixth starter in a sense, and certainly the first guy to come up out of the minors. Has he normalized. I mean, he struggled this year, but it seems like he was on a little bit more of an uptick than Jonathan Stiever was at this point.
Yeah, his innings has always been weird. Stiever has just pitched a lot more and it goes deeper in innings. Like Lambert will have these like 2-inning starts and be taken out just because that's just where his innings limit is.
Right.
And he still, whenever he gets into the second order in the rotation, that's really when he starts struggling a ton. That usually happens with any pitcher. Well, not usually, it always happens. But some can just mitigate it a little bit less. Lambert obviously can't, but he's been fine lately, like nothing special, but he's also in this weird limbo of getting like spot starts, well, like whenever the Sox need it. So he's just pushed back. He's kind of toyed with, which isn't always great for development, but you got to do what you got to do for.
So, at this point, Darren, then again, this is certainly I dwell on the negative because the White Sox rotation has been lights out. They've been extraordinary and beyond anybody's hopes this year. But really at this point, even with Ronaldo Lopez on an upswing, the White Sox literally do not have more than 5 guys who could be treated as, and that's with Rodon healthy, more than 5 guys who are actual true starters. Anywhere. There is not a 6th guy they can call up that they can say, here's the ball, give us 5 innings or give us 6 innings.
Yeah. And I mean, the reason why we're like saying like, oh, it's so great for the White Sox. Well, this is the Miners podcast and they're not really that great. Like none of them, even the guys that we thought should be good, like Dahlquist, Kelly, and Thompson were really bad this year. Like the pitching has just been really bad.
Yeah.
And there's nothing you can do about that. Maybe last year of no games really hurt the young guys, which I can see being the case, especially for people that barely pitched either in college or high school before they were even drafted. Maybe they had a year and a half off. Like, it's really hard to come back from.
And Darren, the one guy that you could have said, even though he wasn't in a position to take the 6th spot, but the one guy you said could have consistently given you that 5 or 6 and had a strong year from the start. Don't know what he's done with his new team, but they traded him. That was Connor Pilkington. So again, whether you project him to be major league starter or not, he was the one guy you could have reasonably said, even more than Kay McClure, who's had ups and downs this year. Taylor Varnell's had ups and downs, and of course has just begun to scratch Birmingham. That one guy is actually gone. The one healthy guy, the one guy you might have actually said, let's give him the ball because we're desperate because two guys got injured. He's gone. So, all right, before we take a break, let's talk about one more guy in Charlotte, and that is a much happier topic, and it is the Romy González experience. Some say Romy, some say Rami. I'm going to stick with Romy. I don't know why, because you say Rami, but okay. R. González has just set the system on fire. A guy who wasn't even a shortstop in 2019 now takes over shortstop as his primary position. Isn't doing great, but he isn't exactly completely fumbling it. Has basically been good in every aspect of the game. Then gets his call up to Charlotte and goes bananas. I think he was at 1.7 for 10 with power hits, not just singles. He's plummeted probably to just like 500 now or whatever, but he's hit the ground running in Charlotte. He's a guy who clearly, as you point out in the weekly update in print on site, is a guy who has his sights clearly set for the major league roster next year. We'll see if the ascendance can continue, but give me some feedback on what this guy's done and how much he's surprised you with what he's done this year, getting up to Charlotte and playing well.
Yeah, well, his whole entire season has been really surprising in general. Just going off of what he was doing in 2019, like he had a fine season. It was okay. He struck out a lot. He walked a lot. But this like power surge that he has right now has not even been remotely on anybody's radar. Like he's a 2020 guy this year. Some of the 20 is just new rules, but he's also like actually hitting like the amount of pull that he's getting. He's hitting a lot of ground balls still, which maybe could be a problem if you're looking at his home run per fly ball rate. Like it was 30% in AA, and that's not fantastic. But it was just such over a long period of games that he's pretty clearly has a lot of power. He just kind of needs to shore up his swing and zone a little bit to get more of that oomph, to get more balls in play, going high, line drives, fly balls compared to the grounders that he's hitting. But yeah, next year seems to be the year that finally Leary Garcia will leave. And if there's anybody that's going to replace him, it's going to be Gonzalez. Just from how he's been doing this season, and Danny Mendick has not stepped up at all this year. So he would be the logical next choice to take up that spot.
Okay, Darren, we have a theme running, but we've just begun that theme. We are going to pick the theme back up on the other side of the break. We're going to take a quick one out here on Southside Sox on the Farm podcast number 15 with Darren Black. We'll be back in just a minute. Hey, that minute's up. Repping the Montreal Expos. Shout out to former Southside Sox honcho Jim Margulis. Love that you're stealing his gig, Darren. Go for it. All right. Repping the Montreal Expos. It is Darren Black with me. He's our main primary, tireless, whatever, expert, whatever you want to call him. Pick an adjective. It doesn't have to be a really nice one. It can be like a mundane one, but pick what adjective you wish. It's Darren Black. He's on for roughly half, 3 days a week, minor league updates, weeklies, monthlies, podcasts, wardrobe changes with hats, venue changes for podcasts. I love it. He's a total package, the triple threat. We were talking about a trend that you brought out in the latest weekly update, and that is the White Sox don't have a lot of guys doing well at the minor league level. We have some guys who have sort of been the 4As, the Burgers, and the Sheetses who've gone up, done well. They're back down with Charlotte, still doing well. Those guys you almost don't count as part of the organization. They're almost now with the Sox, even though they still have rookie status. But really, pitching wise, I think you already addressed. They're basically nothing. And position player wise, not a ton. Certainly not a ton who will be with the team and the organization in 2022. But the three guys who have really stood out as best. We talked about one, that's Romy González at Charlotte, who's been brought up to Charlotte. Let's talk about a couple more. It's sort of nice that we're not talking about DHs or first baseman as the position of strength of the White Sox, but it's middle infield. So let's move on to Yolbert Sánchez, a guy who hasn't really didn't even hit at the start of this season, but he's really picked it up in Birmingham. I'm presuming his fielding is still pretty stellar, given that's sort of been his part and parcel. But this is a guy who now is going from maybe a fringe utility guy to maybe at least there's an ellipsis there where you're like, well, who knows? Maybe there could be something more here because he's showing something in Birmingham that you might not have anticipated.
Yeah, well, in general, whenever someone goes and hits in Birmingham, that's pretty like an exciting thing. I don't know, maybe this year's just different because it seems like a lot of people have been hitting in Birmingham.
Birmingham's the only team doing anything, and they're hitting too.
Yeah. They must have the 2019 MLB balls, and they're just not going to have a great offensive season next year. Or something like
they've got a humidor. They've got some weird supplements that are still like they're sketchy. Right.
But just what I look out for when someone gets a promotion, obviously you look at batting average, homers, ISO, and stuff like that. But always look at walks and strikeout rate, because if you kind of expect them to go up. And if they go down or are better because you want higher walks or more walks, then that's just a surprisingly good thing. Right now, he has a very Nick Madrigal kind of plate discipline with a strikeout rate under 10% and then a walk rate under 5%. His walks probably aren't going to stay that low, but that K rate for him is where you especially want it, because if he is going to be a major league ball player, you want it to be in the 8 to 12. Well, of course, you want it to be better than what it is. But like maybe max 12, 13, 14%. That's kind of where you want him to be because of the type of player he is. Not much power in there. There probably will never be much power in there. But if a guy that can actually hit 300 or so, 280, 300, and get on base with a little bit of a walk rate with fantastic defense, like that's a fantastic bench utility guy there that can play second, short, and third.
Unlike you, Darren, I'm dumb, but I guess what I look at is when these guys are getting promoted and then they're actually stepping up, they seem like they're finding enough gear. And I know that's a version of what you're saying, but just the eye test type of stuff, when they're actually maybe not even just holding what they were doing, but actually maybe stepping it up. And we've seen that in a very short sample size with Gonzalez, but we've seen it with Sánchez. It's like, well, hold on. You like having your head turned in that way, because it's like, this is something it lets you dream a little bit. It's nice in this system, which I think recently, I don't know if it was MLB Pipeline, whoever it was said we're the worst. So
yeah, it's not great. But
30.
This year is so just based off pure deserving to be promoted, there hasn't been a ton, but when people have been promoted, they have been doing well because they've actually deserved to be promoted. So again, Yolbert Sánchez is doing better than he did in single A. Through a week and a half, Jose Rodríguez is doing better than he did in low A, and Yoelqui Céspedes through a week is doing better than he did at high A compared to double A. So there's just like a lot of guys that are just doing well because they're just good. And there's not a big, huge amount of that. But for a team that wants to keep the window open, then you got to look at these lower levels and see who is going to be that next bench guy, maybe starter come the later years.
Yeah. Rodríguez was going to be the third guy we're going to talk about to keep the theme going. But boy, we've talked about Jose Rodríguez a lot, and he deserves it. He seems like he's running away with our minor league player of the year in terms of our MVP votes. He's got a very healthy lead there, and there's not that much season left. Wait, I want to mention, because Jose did play for Kannapolis this year. I failed to figure out the cleverness of your prediction that the Kannapolis Cannonballers would win the second half, because apparently there isn't a second half. Apparently it's just a full season. And so technically, Darren, you're right. They are tied for first in the second half that won't be played. So very clever. You're correct. I didn't think you were going to be correct, but you were correct in your prediction. Nicely done. But let's skip Jose because we talk about him all the time. He's awesome. I'm super high on him. You seem a shade less high, but still pretty high on him. You can't argue with the guy's done, and we'll be talking about him next week anyway. So let's move on to Yoelqui Céspedes, because he's another guy like Sánchez who has gotten promotions. I mean, a lot of stuff is new to him. We had a sort of a little discussion on site about like how professional he's been, how much experience he's been, how fast he should move through the system. I think it's undeniable, and you probably even acknowledge the fact that he's hit the ground running the way he has in the States, being off the way he has is still impressive, even though he certainly has more prep than say Colson Montgomery, of course. But the fact that, again, he's moved to Birmingham and he seems like he's doing as much or more than he did at Winston-Salem gives you an idea that perhaps he's a guy, even this time next year, he could even be thinking White Sox.
Yeah, he's got to continue the pace for the next month and a couple weeks. But of course, the cynical White Sox fan in me will be like, well, I'm sure the right fielder will be Mike Rodolfo or Yoelqui Céspedes, whoever wins the job in spring training next year. Of course, I don't know if that's going to happen. But if we were looking at in-house guys that could be starting in right field and forcing Eloy to DH all the time, then these two guys would be people to look at if they wanted to platoon with Adam Engel a bit. But I mean, you can't really expect much from a guy. Of course, he hasn't played, nobody played last year. And then he also had to go through everything with emigrating from Cuba. So he's been through a lot these past couple of years. And even just seeing him do relatively well would have been great, but he's hit the ground running, showed a bunch of power, a bunch of speed early on. It's been really fun.
And he's playing center field. I mean, I know he was touted sort of as a right fielder, and that's more because that's White Sox need, but I mean, for given he went from DHing, like, okay, when is he going to play the field, to like, oh, okay, center field. And he's pretty much primarily center fielder. Not bad. Darren, you're ignoring the fact that, come on, we both know who the right fielder is going to be in 2022. It's Adam Eaton. It's Adam Eaton. Come on. And they're going to get, and here's the good news. They're going to get, Han's going to lock him up on the first day of free agency. Write it down.
Adam Eaton, the new Scott Podsednik. You just bring him back.
Sure. Who cares if we 3 out like trash in July? Come on back, because we need that lefty bat. Okay, let's jump to Arizona and talk briefly about them before we wind this up. There's been some real impressive performances, not even necessarily by guys from the draft class. And certainly I think primarily has been Wes Kath. He really hasn't seemed to sneeze once since he's started up. Colson Montgomery's also been, he's not quite at that level, but he's showed out pretty well. Okay. Guys that have jumped out at you as most impressive, because there's a number of names who have sort of hit the ground running in Arizona, and a couple guys probably even already bumped up to Kannapolis.
Yeah, I think Future Sox actually ranked the best batting average ACL guy with Wilfred Veras. He's a really young guy. He's only 18. So whenever you see one of the reasons we are like really excited about Jose Rodríguez and Brian Ramos is because they're 20 and 19 playing full season ball for the first time and doing well.
Yeah.
And age, doing stuff at a lower age is always much more impressive. Unless you're Romy González and prove that you're just better than everybody else by the time that you move up. But yeah, he's showing like a bit more power than his stature would say. He's only 180, but he is a first base, third base guy. The plate discipline is fine. You expect the walks to fall and Ks to go up as you leave rookie ball. But yeah, he's been good. A 151 WRC plus.
Yeah, how cool is it that this guy, who definitely, I mean, if Jose Rodríguez even maybe wasn't on a few radars, and shame on you if it wasn't before the season. I mean, this is a guy who you can honestly be like, okay, who, what? And he's like been arguably their best player in Arizona. I think he's had a little bit more time than the draft class, but maybe not. That's pretty awesome. It's sort of nice that the Sox have, especially, well, I guess they only have one Arizona team, Darren, so it's easier to stack that team. But I mean, it's sort of nice that they have abundant talent there. The record doesn't reflect it, but sort of cool that they've got like what seem like some legit bats and young bats.
Yeah, they do. I mean, another guy, I mean, of course, everyone is really young on this team.
Yeah.
It's rookie ball. But a guy that's been in the system for a while, Jefferson Mendoza, is also there. He's not doing so well this season compared to 2019, but the plate discipline is still there, and he's a catcher. So if someone is a little bit rated higher in their catcher, that's always something you got to watch out for, because those guys probably get to the majors more quickly than anybody else just because of the amount of injuries they have. But yeah, and then it's the 2021 draft guys after that. The lineup is pretty fun.
We're not going to write off the as you acknowledge, some of the lower level struggling pitchers, Matthew Thompson, Jared Kelly, Drew Dahlquist. Of course, we're not writing them off. It's been a tough season for all of them. I don't think there's any argument around that. But let's take a spin on that. And is there an arm lower in the system to be excited about? Are there guys that are even showing signs of, okay, hey, this is going to be a next wave, or a wave that catches up to Thompson, Kelly, Dahlquist? You can say no.
Well, besides the 2021 draftees like Tanner McDougal, like a guy like that, Sean Burke, not really. I mean, there are some guys that you can that are, if you look at scouting reports, are projectable. Like maybe they figure out something like a Christian Mena, who started out pretty well and has good K numbers still. He's just got hit around a ton. He's got 52 hits allowed and 35 in a third inning, which is obviously not very good, but he could be a projectable guy, but not really anything on the younger side.
If I lost my mind, Darren, or was Ronaldo Guzman really good in the DSL? And obviously he's struggling this year. Am I thinking of a different guy?
Yeah, no, see, I was like really excited to see how you would do in Arizona compared to, or I guess I wasn't sure where he would start at the beginning of the season with no Great Falls. But now he went from a guy who the walk numbers were fine. Obviously it was the DSL, so maybe the strike zone was just maybe not fantastic, but he's walking over 12 batters per 9 innings. It's really horrendous. It's really like, he looked like a guy that could be fine because he was 16 doing that in the DSL, which is impressive. But now at 18, missed a year, he's lost his command.
Because now I'm scared. I mean, we got Norge Vera coming. He'll be in the States, next year. And you expect, all right, he's going to just cut through the minors like butter. But then it's like, okay, wait, Ronaldo Guzman, I was sort of, I mean, I know it's not the same guy at all, but it's like, wait, the numbers would indicate. I mean, Norge Vera would be lucky to have his numbers like Ronaldo Guzman in his first year at DSL. So, I mean, now I'm like, I'm gun shy. Now I'm scared that any guy that comes over DSL who showed pretty well in the Dominican is going to struggle, because that's he's been so bad. I've thought, well, wait, do I have the wrong, am I remembering the wrong guy? But no, that's the guy. And that's,
that's why I have a tough time kind of like, I know Dahlquist, Thompson, and Kelly have all been like I mean, they've been terrible. That's just how they've been. But I just have a huge problem because they're so young, and no year last year. I wouldn't be surprised if these guys were just like, oh, we're actually good again next year, and played more like their 2019 either projected stats or how they actually played in Ronaldo Guzman's case. But I mean, if 2021 is a lost year, it's a lost year. But some people still have found a way to fight through that. It's just all been on the hitting side. The pitching has just not seen that.
Yeah, just because some guys have hit the ground running, some guys have stepped up. Despite the lost season, we won't know until this time next year how some of those guys really did bounce back. And you're right, very easily those top. I mean, there's a reason they're so highly rated. So of course, nobody is writing these guys off, even as we acknowledge a lost season. So you're right. It could be as much as just getting back into the routine, shaking some rust off. The full season ball is huge. And yeah, I mean, it might be a lot to ask that, all three are not going to disappoint, but the idea that all three of them are clearly, they're just done is ridiculous. So let's just hope that, assuming all of them are going to be repeating Kannapolis, or at least maybe starting there, let's just hope that Darren's like, they might go backwards, buddy, but but it's okay. The answer essentially is no, and that's fine. Because we sort of know that there really isn't. There are some bullpen arms, or there are some even starters who may end up projecting bullpen arms. It's not to say there's not an arm in the system, but wow, it's as close as I can probably remember since doing anything like this for 4 years now. And that's tough because there's just not a lot of, here, the good news is, Darren, there's an off season after this year, no matter World Series or bust, there's an off season where you could do something about that. Now, I don't know that they're going to do anything about that, unless maybe they're going to sign Adam Eaton as a pitcher. They could use a left hand, who knows, because clearly they're getting Eaton back. There's no doubt about it. He's a priority. But there's something you can do about that, whether it's Rodon, whether you can bolster in ways other than calling guys up from Charlotte or Birmingham. I hope the White Sox follow that strategy, because seems like they could. I don't think there's any rule. There's no penalty that they've had imposed on them where they're not allowed to sign legitimate major league starters or anything, right? Okay.
I think there might be some sort of penalty.
Yeah, they're behaving like that. Well, let's hope they take a look. Let's hope they're listening to this podcast and saying, hey, you know what? These guys are, Darren is right. He's wearing an Expos cap. I don't know what's up with that, but he's right. We just don't have much in the system.
Jerry's going to move them to Montreal. Like he tried to move them to Tampa, so he can't spend money.
Yeah, really. Hey, it's the exchange rate, guys. He'll just learn to say that in French. All right. Well, let's wind up this podcast number 15. Thank you for joining me again, Darren. We breezed through, I think, mostly some highlights. I know we talked about some dearth areas as well, but hey, when you have the worst system in the majors, there's going to be some rough patches, but we'll be back next week to talk about probably some highlights. Romy González continuing to crush as a Knight, or Yolbert Sánchez getting the surprise call up to the major. There'll be something crazy. But again, quickly before we go, I guess, who are I guess it's just two guys who are going to get added to the major league roster. Who would be your prediction next week to get added?
So I think Billy Hamilton is going to magically get over his injury on September 1st.
All right.
And then just because they've been bringing up, most of their moves have been bringing up starters, I'm going to go with Jimmy Lambert as the pitcher. And I'm still hoping they just release Jake Lamb and bring up Berger or Sheets to maybe be on the playoff roster. Definitely on September, but maybe on the playoff. I don't know the point of Jake Lamb anymore, but definitely Billy Hamilton gets over his injury and Jimmy Lambert comes up and then probably starts a couple games.
And then once they do release Jake Lamb, so you can bring up Jake Berger, then Luis Gonzalez is out in San Francisco really saying, are you serious?
Yeah.
You got rid of me for 3 weeks and 10 at-bats from Jake Lamb. Oh my God. But hey, that'll be something to talk about in a week or two. Thanks for joining me again, Darren. Thanks everybody as always for listening and reading all of Darren's great stuff and the rest of our minors team, including even reluctantly me on Saturdays. And sometimes even for watching. So thanks everybody for that. Thanks, Darren, for being with me. And maybe I'll call you, who knows, maybe Monday next week.
Yeah, I'm done.
All right, everybody. See you then. We'll probably talk to you again, minors wise, next Tuesday. Thanks for listening.